What's up, everybody? My name is Josh. Welcome to the channel. It is a beautiful day because it's another track day. I'm out here at Atlanta Motorsports Park with my buddy Trent.
What's up?
His car, which is really interesting to me, has been on the channel a couple of times, but we've never gone into any great detail on it, and so that's what I want to do today. First of all, what is it?
It is a 2000 Fixed-Roof Coupe Corvette C5.
So what's the story with the Fixed-Roof Coupe?
So, you know, I believe that GM wanted to make a kind of a bare bones car, and they engineered the FRC. There was no thrills. They all came with manuals. They didn't have all the kind of comfort features the base one had, which wasn't a ton, but they were just trying to get the price point down. And then, you know, in 01, they decided to put a bigger motor in it and call it the Z06. This is a 2000, so in 99 and 2000, they made this body style with the standard motor, and they called it the Fixed Roof Coupe.
What else is different about this from a Z06?
The suspension is different from factory. I think they have a power steering cooler. The differential is different. It's got like shot peen gears. The wheels are different. It's got brake coolers in the rear from factory with the Z06. Mine does not have that.
And that's really kind of the distinctive thing
That's
if you're trying to recognize a Z06 is the brake cooler.
The wheels, for sure, but somebody could obviously change that, but the brake cooler is extremely difficult. You have to cut your body, and if it doesn't have a brake cooler, it's not a Z06.
Obviously, this car is far, far, far from stock. Let's try to run through as much of it as we can. Starting with the exterior, what is that?
That's a Plasti-Dip paint job.
So, I've never said this to Trent, but I'll do it now for the sake of the video. When I think of somebody Plasti-Dipping their car, I don't necessarily think of somebody who has the means, you know, to go other routes, or somebody who like really cares about being meticulous with their vehicle. So why Plasti-Dip?
That's interesting. I like to do things myself. So outside of, you know, finances, I just like to do everything myself, even if I break stuff, which I typically do. So Plasti-Dip is something you can do yourself, and the car has, the chassis has like 170,000 miles on it. So it's chipped up and beat up, and it's black, hot, you know?
Yeah.
So I wanted to go with a lighter color.
So this isn't really about protecting the paint?
No.
Okay.
Not so much. I mean, it does. I mean, it's awesome. When I'm working on the car, I don't care. You know, I don't care. So it does protect the paint, but the front of it is pretty chipped up from 170,000 miles of, you know, road use when I bought it. But the rest of it's fine. I mean, it's in great shape besides the hood and bumper, basically. If you peeled this off, it would be just like the day I did it 4 years ago. And this is like 4 years old. I think I did 2 or 3 base coats and 2 or 3 color coats. And also, pro tip, mix the paint before you spray it.
What happens if you don't?
My first gallon, I bought the spray gun they offer, and I just went to town, you know. And I got to the bottom, and there was like a pound of pigment in the bottom of the gallon because I just used a paint stir and did like this. But no, get your drill out.
First thing I noticed about this car is you've got like C5R headlights, but you have Plasti-Dip most of them.
Yep. So the reason for that, they came with the car when I bought it. They are beyond oxidized on the top, like beyond oxidized. So when I was doing my my Plasti-Dip, honestly, I wanted to go fast, so I just painted the whole thing. Then I turned the headlights on. I saw the outline, and I got a razor knife and just cut it out. And this is just from, you know, from the wind, basically.
What's the benefit of the hood vents?
2 things for me. One was when I make grid, when I do the track days, you know, and there's run sessions, you have to go and grid up and sit for 5 to 10 minutes or so. And these things let out a tremendous amount of heat. So my on grid, I'm really particular about oil temperature, and it's a way to just get heat out of the car when you're on grid. I mean, you just see you know, the heat just coming out of the engine.
What's the no-no level of oil temperature for you personally?
So this motor, the motor we get into later, runs 2050 oil, conventional. The shop I went to is kind of an old school shop, and they run things a little bit looser. And so it runs a 2050 weight conventional, not synthetic. And I didn't care to argue with the engine builder. So with a conventional oil, I don't really want to see any more than 240 or 250. It starts to shear really quick. Synthetics can handle a lot more temperature.
So I guess let's dive into the motor. What do these come with from the factory?
LS1.
And what are the specs of that basically?
So before it had, they're like 350 horsepower or so. When I bought the car, it was already kind of track prepped to a certain extent. The whole top end had been changed to the Z06, the LS6 style motor, and it had a cam. It made 400 wheel horsepower, and it had one of the knock sensor wires was broken behind the intake manifold, And so I was on track and I was getting faster and faster, and I could feel the motor just losing power. And it'd lose power for like 5 minutes, and the ECU would figure out that I guess it wasn't shorting anymore and would give me more power. So took the intake manifold off, fixed it. Next track outing, when I had all power available all the time, I spun rod bearings. What happened was when they put the heads on it, the Z06 heads on it, they used ARP studs. And when I was taking them off, the torque was extremely different from hole to hole. And they obviously didn't torque the heads down properly, and it ended up pushing coolant into the oil. And coolant in your oil on road Atlanta is not what you want. So that's what the engine didn't break, you know, an install error caused the motor to break. So the new one is, so I also have a Cadillac CTSV I'm getting a motor built for. And I basically took the motor out of my CTSV, which is an LSA, which is basically an LS3 with a little bit better aluminum design, a little bit stronger aluminum. And I got it built at a shop local to me in Doraville, and to basically an LS3, naturally aspirated.
So what kind of power are you thinking right now?
When it took it to the dyno, right after I installed it in the chassis, it made 465 and 465. It's got a torque cam in it, so it's not for high numbers. It literally makes over 450 foot-pounds of torque from like 2,000 to 5,000 RPMs. Jesus. It's just the cam profile is just all torque all the time, and it trades off a significant horsepower number. You know, if you put a text-to-speed, you know, horsepower cam in it, I'm sure it would be well over 500.
Wow.
But you know, your torque would be a peak and a drop-off, you know.
Let's move to interior real quick.
So, big item is the Holly. I'm using a Holly Terminator with drive-by-wire to drive the car. So I fabricated a little dash here. Terminator doesn't do oil temperature or fuel, so I have a couple small gauges for that. I added a big tachometer so I could just see my revs, see where I was at.
Kirky or Ultra Shield seats, right? What's the difference between the Kirkys and the Ultra Shields?
Brand name.
Okay. So aluminum, lightweight, and for track purposes, comfy enough, right?
Oh yeah. I used to drive this with these seats in it. I would drive it to Savannah to Roebling Road. You know, I got the familiar with the purple mattresses. They sell extremely nice cushions, and I have a 1-inch and a 3-inch model.
Nice. Just throw it in for the drive.
Just put it right in the bottom, and it's, you know, a pound.
Do you still drive it on the street at all?
Not really. I mean, it's tagged and insured and everything, and I can. So when I do major modifications to the car, I can take it on the street. But it is a beast to tame on the public road.
And then you've got a harness bar.
Yep, and back mounts, back braces for the seats, because the aluminum seats can you know, bend whenever your weight hits back into them.
Okay. So
they're fully locked in, you know.
Is that cool suit?
Yep, cool suit back there.
Right on.
Got my pulse width modulation right here, so I can turn it up and down. Got a new steering wheel for it since last time as well. The collapsible hub, give you a little bit more room in the event of an accident.
You've removed a bunch of stuff. At this point, is it ever going back in the original interior?
I don't have plans to do it. I have everything in a warehouse, but I don't have plans to put it back together.
So how much weight have you saved?
I'd never scaled it beforehand, but if you take like kind of average numbers from the internet, you would get anywhere from 300 to 400 pounds of weight savings.
So what does it weigh in at right now?
Right now, without me in it, it's about 2,800 pounds.
Wheels and tires. These look like, I'm gonna take a guess, and I probably knew this at one point, but it looks like you've got the rear Z06 square setup all the way around.
That's right.
Toyo R888Rs.
That's right.
And these are 305 3518s.
Yep.
How do you feel about them?
They're all right. I want to try something different with all the endurance racing, the 200 tread wear tires. I have some experience with those, and I like them better. I like the 660, the RE71. So I want to give those a try. They're very durable. They last a long time, but and they're very consistent. They just don't have the sidewall, in my opinion, is too loose. It's not stiff enough. These tires are the wrong size too, so that's a whole nother problem. You know, if anybody's out there looking at a car, get a 315 30/18. You know, it makes your sidewall a ½ inch shorter on both sides. That's obviously going to help. The brakes are C6 Z06. Came with the car when I bought it. It's got the DBA rotors up front. That's a stock rotor in the rear, and it's got Carbotech. And I run 12 and 10, and then a bunch of suspension stuff. It's got the Penske single adjustable G-Speed kit. It's got the G-Speed sway bars, massive sway bars with their all the Heim joint stuff. It's got LG drop spindles, so it drops it down about 1 inch. It's got the SKF race wheel bearings and ARP studs. So a bunch of and a bump steer kit in the rear from G-Speed as well.
Yeah, let's talk about the bump steer kit. That's new since the last time you had it out here. What were you finding necessitated a bump steer kit?
So another thing that it has too is the is a Delrin bushings. Wish I could remember the guy's name, but it's got Delrin bushings everywhere. Every single control arm bushing has been replaced with Delrin. So the car had 160,000 miles on it. I lightweighted it, and it just everything was mushy and moving all over the place, and it was riding too high. So I just spent a ton of time on getting the suspension dialed in. With the square setup, you obviously get a ton more front tire contact patch, so it wants to oversteer. From factory, that's why they put the smaller tire up front, so it'll push before it'll oversteer. And when you make a change like this, you basically kind of negate that and then have to start dialing the suspension in to get it back where you want it. And then, you know, camber, I do all my alignments at home. I have all the tools to do pretty good alignments at home. So I spend a ton of time learning. And the bump steer kit, you know, you'd be going around a turn and the rear end just still felt stiff from the bushings, but it just felt like things were happening back there that shouldn't be happening. And the only thing that wasn't heimed was my rear tie rod. It was the only thing that had any type of movement in it. And I bought a bump steer kit, and I saw, as I cycled the suspension through its travel, I saw about a ½ inch of dynamic toe, meaning toe was being added and subtracted as the wheel was going up and down.
Now, I'm no suspension expert, but I can make an educated guess and say that you do not want your alignment changing dynamically as you're driving. Is that fair to say?
Certainly not. Maybe in a circle track application, but certainly not on the road course. You know, and it runs about an 1/8 inch toe in the rear. So that can give you an idea of where it statically should be, about an 1/8 inch, but it was going a ½ inch in both directions. So it was like almost a total inch of travel.
Another thing that I forgot about is with the brakes, you replumbed the brake lines, correct? And there's no ABS?
No ABS, no traction control, no computer. And the only computer is the one that just basically runs the motor. It's the only computer it has. So yeah, replumbed the brake system. That was necessitated by, just took the whole car apart, and things were just not kind of up to my standard for how I wanted repairability and maintenance to be. Okay. So I put a system together where the drivetrain can be dropped out of the car without having to mess with the brakes or anything like that.
I know from my C5 Z06 that the ABS system can be problematic, and if you get a failure, my understanding is it's like impossible to get parts to fix it.
That's actually a good point. 01 plus, you can get them repaired still. Prior to 01, there's 2 variants. This is prior to 01, and mine was failed. So what would happen is it still worked, but it was extremely sluggish. And I didn't want it to work on the track anyways, but on the street, if you got a little bit into it, it would turn on about 3 seconds too late. So you'd be going straight or you'd be doing something, and then it would remember what happened 3 or 4 seconds ago, and I had to remove it for the track. And removing that system is really what necessitated all new brakes. You just can't take that one piece out.
This is the factory titanium Z06 exhaust?
Sure is, yeah. Way lighter. Before it was some MagnaFlow kit that actually came with the car. I was having problems with the connection between the header and the X-pipe of the old exhaust leaking at temperature, and the Holley, the wideband's right in front of it. So any leaks post wideband, the scavenging of the exhaust will actually pull fresh air from the atmosphere into it, and the wideband was getting really erratic readings, leading to poor motor performance.
Got it.
So I basically got a kit that solved that problem. And while I was at it, I probably took 30 pounds off the rear of the car at least. Titanium is an exotic material. You don't really find yourself handling titanium very much. And those exhaust pipes are pretty large because it includes the pipe that goes over the axle. When you're holding this massive piece of metal and it weighs like 10 pounds, it just almost like doesn't make sense when you're holding the exhaust pipes. It literally doesn't make sense how big it is and just how much, it's just like air. It's nuts. Shifter MGW. MGW shifter.
Is the transmission basically stock?
No, it's got RPM transmissions. I forget the level, probably just like in the middle. Oh, it's got an RPM diff. So it's another difference between the Z06 and the standard Corvette is the transmission gearing. The differential gearing is the same, 342, but the transmission gearing is tighter. So what I ended up doing is send it to G-Speed because it had 165,000 miles on it. They did my transmission and my diff. They also put a 373 in the diff, which if you look at the final drive ratio is virtually identical to a Z06. So just by changing the diff gearing, I was able to shorten all the gears up and basically get a Z06 style of gearing with a standard transmission.
All right, so that wraps up the build. Something that I want to point out about Trent that will just help illustrate, and this is why it was so surprising to me, and I'm glad he explained the thought process behind the Plastidip. Trent is an extremely meticulous person when it comes to cars, at least. I don't know about the rest of his life, but he told me that he has removed, cleaned, and chased every single fastener on this car. True or false?
Oh, true. 100% true. You break the bolt loose and you can take every bolt off with your hands.
I'm a firm believer that you should make friends with people who have qualities that you should probably have but you don't, in the hopes that it'll rub off on you a little bit, and that's Trent when it comes to being meticulous with his machinery.
Yeah, it saves so much time, you know. Those bolts come off, you know, 10 more times, you know. You spend a little bit of time on the first one, but then every time after that it's enjoyable and faster. I think you save time overall with the approach.
With an LS on the track, high RPM oil starvation can be an issue. Does this have that issue? How do you mitigate it?
It really doesn't have. So we could probably do a whole series on the engine. I built it myself and it's got a bunch of parts in it. I really like Improved Racing. I think their products are awesome. They have no sponsorship or anything, but they make incredible products, mostly around oiling systems. So it's actually the only sticker that I have on my car is for that company, because I respect what they do so much. So they do a bunch of stuff, but for this has what they call the Batwing oil pan. So it's completely flat on the bottom and it's very wide. So the oil kind of always has somewhere to go, but they also sell a trapdoor kit for the Batwing oil pan. So the oil pan has trapdoors in it. So when you're going around turns, the door will actually shut to the side that the oil is trying to go to and will almost prevent the oil from going that direction. And it keeps the pickup tube always submerged in oil.
Do you have the trapdoor kit?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. It also has a, they sell windage trays that are not like GM calls what they have a windage tray. It's not a windage tray. This is more like a scraper. So when I put it on the motor, I was spinning the crank around and taking feeler gauges and making sure I had 40 thousandths of clearance everywhere. So it's so tight to the crankshaft that it scrapes the oil off of the crankshaft effectively. Not obviously physically touching, but it's so close that the vapors and everything that are being pushed off scrapes it off and puts it down into the oil pan. So Improved Racing, I obviously don't claim that it's going to make any horsepower, but they have done independent studies and they've found more horsepower with the crank scraper. It lightens your crankshaft, right, by pulling oil off of it.
Because it's not holding the oil on.
Yeah, and it's putting it where it needs to be as well.
Wow.
It's incredible stuff, and it really, really works. The car's got an oil cooler on it too.
Okay.
I mean, that was one of the things that the LSA comes with piston squirters for the supercharger to cool the pistons down. So this car is retained that, you know, because it's an LSA block basically. And one thing I found going from one to the other, which was very interesting, is my oil was significantly hotter than it was previously, which didn't make much sense to me until you thought about the fact that the oil squirters are effectively pulling heat out of the piston and returning it into your oil pan. So it's cooling the top of the motor, but heating the bottom of the motor through the oil. Yeah. And so I had to actually install an oil cooler from Improved Racing with their thermostat kit, and it is incredible. I mean, I dropped my oil temperature like 40 degrees or so. It was undrivable previously.
Are you speaking of cooling, are you doing anything with the transmission or the diff?
No, the diff and the transmission don't have any cooling. I change the oil frequently, but it doesn't have any. To me, it's one of those things where it's upgraded components and parts. It's another failure point, you know, and most of those kits are not well thought out in my opinion, and I just don't want to I don't want to create a problem that's not a problem, basically.
So that's, like Trent said, you know, we could do a whole video just about the motor and everything he's done to it, but that gives you at least an overview of what's involved here. So you might just think like somebody stripped out the Corvette and Plastidiped it and put some sparkly numbers on it. What's the deal with the sparkly numbers, by the way?
So I like bass fishing. I had a bass boat. I went to college at Georgia College. I went there because there's a lake next door to it, and I got a super cheap bass boat off Craigslist, and I just caught bass in my free time, you know. So it's a harkening back to the bass boat glitter.
When you look at it in detail and you understand the story behind a lot of it, it's a truly impressive car. And I've driven it in a significantly kind of, you know, like earlier state than it's in right now. That was a little over a year ago. The car was an absolute monster, but it sounds like it might be more of a refined monster at this point.
I would say the hardware hasn't changed a ton. The hardware's changed a little bit, but the fine tuning has changed significantly since the alignment, the bump steer, all the alignment and suspension geometry stuff has changed a significant amount. The last time I were out here, I had my brake my brake proportioning valve completely opposite.
We wasted about half of the day on figuring out the brake situation, and then once we did, it was a lot better.
That's how unrefined it was at that point.
Right.
Is stuff like that was still like kind of the low-hanging fruit. Was the brakes were completely messed up. Testing
and iterating on settings and stuff is a huge part of it. So last time we were out here, you ran a 136.7. 136.7. I ran a 134.2. It's hot today, or it's going to be hot. It's probably about 80 now, but it's going to get up to about 90. Little bit cloudy, but even with the conditions being not as good as they were last time we were out, I suspect we're going to see significantly better times. So
I sure hope so.
Let's get out on track. My body is ready.
Ready?
Yes, sir. But a lot of people, you know, will push a little bit too hard on the outlap and then think, oh, like I'm sliding here, I'm losing traction there, whatever. And then they sort of use that to form the basis for their next lap when it's faulty information because the tires are cold.
Okay, thanks. I love any feedback, any tips.
Good. Whoops. Good reaction to the lockup. That was a 137.
It's pushing.
Is it?
And I've never really experienced that in the car.
Interesting. I wonder how much of that is the conditions too.
I think it's, you know, the tires too.
Right. That other steering wheel was so cheesy looking.
It was, wasn't it?
It was bad. Now that I know the story of the plasti dip, like I'm behind it. I'm a fan. There's nothing that you could have told me about that steering wheel. You could have said that your like uncle used that steering wheel in the first Fast and the Furious movie and gave it to you as a gift, and I'd still be like, yeah, but it's really
Well, you want to know the
cool.
funny thing? I bought it from a guy that tunes cars, import cars in Atlanta.
Uh-huh.
And that car was in Fast and Furious.
You're joking.
It was.
38.
Whoa! Wow, what did you start at?
32.
Wow.
I guess I'm used to starting in the morning.
Yeah. Wow,
That's why it was sliding everywhere.
that explains a lot. Boys and girls, final session of the day is hot, hot, hot. Approaching 90 degrees, which, you know, isn't ideal. And Trent does have this thing set up for a cool shirt, and he and I both own cool shirts, but neither of us really thought to bring them today, so that's okay. But the heat where it really matters today, it seems like, is with the tires, the fronts especially, which have a lot more heat cycles on them than the rears. They're just done, and the car understeers a lot as a result. And so it's always kind of a weird feeling when you've got different levels of grip at the front and the rear, because ideally, you know, the tires would be equal, and that makes it kind of predictable because, well, for obvious reasons, I suppose. So this is not ideal, but track day under non-ideal conditions is better than just about any other kind of day, so I'll take it. Last time I went out, the tires were already hot. This time we've allowed them to cool down a bit, and I'm a little more comfortable with the controls. you know, Trent's awfully tall, and now he's really got the car set up for his height, and so I'm struggling a little bit with the reach and everything. But I feel like my first session helped me to get used to it, and now it should be good. And we've really only got a couple of laps before the tires get too hot, so I kind of need to make it happen like on my first flying lap. Thanks, bud. Trent seems to trust the brakes more than I do, so he was getting deeper into the brake zones than I was, and as a result his lap times were faster than mine, so that's a cool thing. But maybe I can learn from it, do a little bit better. Tons of traction for acceleration in a straight line. So that's kind of where the traction ends. Yeah, understeer. Yeah, the brakes are so touchy. Alright, that's the best I could do. Not much, but it's honest work. That was awesome. Big props to Trent for coming out and for letting me drive it. What a sweet time. What an awesome car. All right, well that was the track day with Trent. There's an hour or so left in the day, but neither one of us are particularly excited about taking the car out again. No fault of the car. It's just a hot day and greasy tires. So we're gonna call it there. Thanks for coming along for the ride. See you next time.